The martial arts craze among young kids in the UK was at its peak in the mid-1980s, with movies like Karate Kid and American Ninja hitting the big screen, and Karate Champ and Way of the Exploding Fist making an impact in the video gaming world. In between those games, Konami produced a fighting game called Yie Ar Kung Fu, which roughly translates to 1-2 Kung Fu. Konami took the bold decision to produce a one-on-one fighter that was most definitely not a combat sports game. In other one-on-one fighters of the time, each player played for points, but in Yie Ar Kung Fu, the player doesn't stop until the other opponent is incapacitated or knocked out. And this game, in my opinion, was a big influence on just about every other one-on-one fighter since. Yie Ar Kung Fu draws its own influence from Bruce Lee martial arts movies, with the main sprite Oolong being based loosely on Bruce Lee himself. The opponents all have various different fighting styles from Oolong, and some even wield weapons such as shurikens, nunchucks and a pole, which meant you couldn't just go in all fists flying, as some strategy was required, which made for some interesting fighting tactics. The controls were also very interesting, where Karate Champ utilised 2 joysticks for the player to control. Konami opted for 2 buttons and a single joystick only. The joystick moved the player left to right across the screen, up for jump and down for duck. But the 2 buttons were used for striking, one for punch and one for kick. But when you hold down punch or kick and then move the joystick in one of 8 directions, the player executed a move. And this is neatly illustrated by the little yellow arrow under the main sprite, letting you know what direction you are using. The player progresses through 2 different contests. The first one, called Hot Fighting History, contains 5 opponents for you to beat, and the second contest, called Master Hand History, contains 6 opponents. Mastery of the skills required to beat all opponents will take some time, and the game just cycles through all of these opponents until the player runs out of lives. So in theory, a very skilled player could play on until they get bored, or until they need the toilet. Yie Ar Kung Fu was released in 1985 in the West, but I first played it in early 1986, when my local chip shop had decided to replace Commando with it, and after the initial shock of no longer being able to play Commando in the arcades, I decided to put my 20 pence in and have a go. And then the disappointment set in. Now, at the time I played this, I hated it. I didn't think it was as enjoyable as Commando, and this might have prejudiced my opinion a little. But Yie Ar Kung Fu was a game I always found tough to play. And I'm not talking about the challenge, although it does have that for sure. No, it was the controls I always struggled to get to grips with. You see, aside from Exploding Fist on a Commodore 64, every other game I played, I was used to pressing a button and seeing something happen. In this game, you press a button and then have to move the joystick to do the move. At the time, it was a lot for my tiny young brain to comprehend, and so I struggled to get to grips with it. Has my opinion on Yie Ar Kung Fu changed over the years, now I am older and wiser? Well, no. My tiny old brain has gotten to grips with the controls now, but Yie Ar Kung Fu is still not a great game in my opinion, and I will try and explain my rationale behind this. Let's start with the fighting, which is what this game is all about, and I'm going to focus on the jump. Aside from the fact it is incredibly ludicrous looking, it almost covers the whole length of the screen, and so trying to use it to jump in close to your opponent results in you endlessly jumping backwards and forwards to try and get the space and timing right to launch an attack. Then we have the attacking itself. Now, as I said, this is a game I could never get to grips with in terms of the controls, but I do remember watching others play this in the chip shop and could see them pounding the attack button rapidly, and this fast action resulted in a series of successive hits which all connected quickly and ended the bout. Now, when you look at the energy or life bar at the top, which was a new feature for the one-on-one fighter, the bar is split into blocks, like a Yorkie bar, but each block is one hit, and so it would only take about 8 hits to win a bout, which isn't a lot if you fight like that, but when you're rubbish at the game like I was, it was a lot. When it comes to the visuals, I don't have too many complaints here. This was a 1984 game, and so looked as good as games could look in that era. The backgrounds are limited to say the least. There are only 2 of them, and the first one with the waterfall is basic, and everything being a shade of blue, apart from the waterfall which is white. The second backdrop has more colour, and this Asian style pagoda. But I guess you won't be spending too much time looking at the backgrounds when you're trying to beat 7 shades of Shinola out of your opponent. Between bouts, you see the fallen sprite of your opponent as they lie flat on their back with their feet in the air, looking quite comical and providing a little bit of comic relief. The sound is typical of games of this era, with limited tunes and sound effects that sound like they do not belong. The sound when you jump sounds like someone blowing through a straw, and the sound when you connect with a hit sounds like a door being slammed shut. You do get some digitised speech at times, but in 1984 these things always took a backseat to the visuals. Thank God things have progressed over the years. The game was a massive commercial success in the arcades both in the East and the West, and it didn't take long for home micro developers to try and snap up the rights. I got the home port for my Commodore 64 sometime in spring 1986, and having not been a big fan of it in the arcades, I thought I would give it a try on the home micro. It had reviewed very positively in the magazines such as Commodore User and CVG, so why not? And to start with, things look good. The visuals, I have to say, are impressive on the humble Commodore 64. With the waterfall background having a bit more colour than the arcade counterpart, and the pagoda background looking very colourful and a definite improvement over the arcade. The main sprite, and in fact all the sprites, look different from the arcade version, with the main one having this more lean and tall look and only being one colour. I guess the single colour is what makes it look leaner. The opponent's sprites look a little messy and splodgy, with very little detail on them at all, and with some comical animation, especially on Nuncha. It does let the visuals down a little, but overall, I have to say they are impressive. The sound is a mixed bag here. The soundtrack has been done by Martin Galway and sounds really good on the 8-bit home micro, but the sounds of the enemy contact as they strike you sounds a little rubbery or muted a tad. But Oolong has this ridiculous sound when he jumps, like a breeze blowing through your curtains, and the sound he makes when he strikes the opponents isn't there, it's just the sound he makes when he performs a move. Again, Nuncha provides some comic relief with the sound. When you look at him toss his nunchucks, the sound it makes sounds like a dentist's suction device, and who needs reminded of a trip to the dentist? So, how does the gameplay fare then? Well, with the 8-bit micros utilising joysticks as the preferred method of game control, and with these joysticks only having one button, it was always going to be tough to replicate the controls of the arcade, and, as expected, this is where Yie Ar Kung Fu falls short of the mark. Imagine done a decent attempt, but whenever I played it, the moves were more blind luck than skill, and with each opponent being very vulnerable to the sweep attack, it means you could in theory progress through the game with only one move, making it very easy, provided you can pull that move off each time, of course. The multiple button bash method from the arcade is used in the home ports as well, but this time it's the opponents that seem to be adept at using it, and at times the CPU gives you a cheap death in about 3 seconds, which is very frustrating indeed. I always found Yie Ar Kung Fu a little disappointing. It wasn't exactly a great game in my opinion, and I had felt that over the years that maybe my opinion was a little hard on it. My main gripe was that the chip shop owner had replaced Commando with it, and for me it didn't provide the same level of fun that Commando gave. But playing it again all these years later, I have to say I stand by my opinion. It's a good port of an average game. That doesn't mean Yie Ar Kung Fu does deserve a slating. You could see what Konami were trying to achieve with the control method and the energy bar, and the fantastical, fast-paced, cartoony action. It established a template that was to be used in fighting games for decades to come, and that fact alone warrants its inclusion into video game folklore. As bad a game as it was responsible for some of the greatest fighting games ever seen, and so it deserves its place in the Video Game Hall of Fame. And that was my look back at Yie Ar Kung Fu. If you like this video, then please do give me a sub and a thumbs up, or maybe even a comment or two below. And that's all from me folks. Thanks for watching.